All right, so what I wanted to do today was to kind of review the dominant seventh and how to use it and work with it some. And then go into what we call other diatonic seventh chords. So we just focused on the dominant seventh and the end of harmony one, but there are other seventh chords within the key that you can use besides the dominant seventh. And so we'll get into that, and then we'll do some analysis that includes those other sevenths. And all this stuff pertains to what we'll go into next, which are secondary dominants, which is a topic for harmony 2. But secondary dominants, are chords that are outside of the key, so they're not diatonic. They're chromatic, what we call. So they incorporate tones from other keys. So that's why there's kind of this distinction between harmony 1, which is diatonic harmony, stuff within the key, and harmony 2 and 3, which are chromatic harmony chords from outside of the key, but brought into a current key, or modulation where you're changing keys or whatever. So that's the distinction. So that's what I want to do today, is cover the dominant, review the dominant seventh, go into other diatonic seventh chords, and then next time we'll move into the secondary dominants. Okay. So just to review the dominant seventh. What's a good key? How about D major? Do you like D major? I'm kind of bored with C major, right? So we need to branch out. All right, so if I take the dominant scale degree and build a seventh chord on it, I get the dominant seventh, right? And what that is a major triad with a minor seventh. Okay? And then if we look at it a little more closely, there's the perfect fifth between the root and the fifth of the chord, and then there's this diminished fifth. Diminished fifth between the third and the seventh of the chord. In other words, a tritone, right? This is a tritone. And the reason that's significant is because that tritone contains two of what we call the tendency tones in the key. So the tendency tones, the leading tone tends to resolve up to tonic, right? T to do, and the seventh tends to resolve down to the third of the tonic chord, or the median step, and so that's fa to mi. So again, we talked about this, like T to do, fa to mi, and those are tendency tones because they have a tendency to move in that way. So when we like hear that interval, we want to hear resolve, and we want to hear the dissonance resolve. So the T to do, fa to mi. And so when we put that inside a dominant seventh chord, it gives them just a very strong push to the tonic chord. Okay. So the dominant seventh is a very powerful chord, but those tendency tones are what drive that to the tonic. And so in our diatonic harmony, which is harmony based within a key, we want to drive towards the tonic. We want to move towards the tonic. Everybody okay with that so far? Okay, so now when I voice that chord for 4 voices, so let's say A, C sharp, those tendency tones come into play. And so we try to resolve the leading tone up to tonic, so that C sharp should go up to tonic, which is D. And then the seventh of the chord should resolve down by step to the third of the one chord, right? And those are, again, those are our tendency tones in the four-part writing. Now, as we said before, if we try to resolve 5/7 to 1 in both in root position and follow the tendency tones as we should, we're going to end up with a problem, because if I want a one chord that has two roots, a third, and a fifth, if I put the fifth in the soprano part here, then I have consecutive fifths. So from this 5/7 chord is a perfect fifth between here and here, and then it moves to a perfect fifth between here and here, between bass and soprano, right? So, and there's no way to do that. You know, it's mathematically impossible to resolve it in some way that's going to be magically work, right? You're always going to have parallel fifths if you follow the tendency tones exactly, and you use a normal doubling of the one chord with a 5/7 chord, okay? So you can't avoid, I use red, so you can murder. So there are various techniques that we use to avoid that, okay, in root position, and then we'll talk about inversion. So if I take that same voicing of the 5/7 and I want to resolve it to 1, in root position 1. But the main point behind all of these is that the seventh must resolve down by step. Even the leading tone can be frustrated with the frustrated leading tone resolution, but the seventh has to resolve down by step. So one of the more common ones is what's called the frustrated leading tone. So instead of resolving the leading tone up to tonic, we take it down a major third to the dominant note. The idea being that as the dominant, that would be an easy pitch for singers to find, rather than the tonic. And if we do that, then the fifth of the chord, so the fifth of this D major triad, instead of being in the soprano and producing consecutive fifths, is in the tenor voice, and so then from bass to tenor and bass to tenor, we change the relationship, and that's good. So then we can still resolve the seventh down by step to the third of the one chord, and we can get the other root. In our root position, one chord, we want to double the root, we can get the other root in the soprano. And so now we don't have any parallel fifths or octaves. So the parallel, or the consecutive fifths that were here, now just go from fifth to octave, and that's cool. So that we call the frustrated leading tone. Another technique involved tripling the root in the one chord and omitting the fifth entirely. So again, if you omit the fifth in one of the chords, you don't have to worry about it. So if I go back to the same voicing of the dominant seventh, and I'm going to 1, then I can resolve the leading tone up to tonic. I can resolve the seventh down by step. And it's just that in this one chord, I don't have a fifth. I have three roots, D, D, and D, but no A, no fifth of the chord. And because I get rid of the fifth, I get rid of the possibility of consecutive fifths. So that's another option. We triple the root. Of the 1. And then another possibility, this one we have to change the way we voice the 5/7 chord. the other option is to omit the fifth in the 5/7 chord. So if we take this 5/7 chord and do it just as we did it, but we get rid of the fifth up here, and we instead double the root of the chord, then we get rid of the fifth in the 5/7 chord, so there's no more E in there. And then when we resolve it to 1, we actually can follow all the tendency tones and still avoid the parallel fifths, because now there's a fifth in the 1 chord, right here, perfect fifth, but there's no fifth here, so there's no consecutive fifths, there's no possibility.
So the previous one, you omit the fifth in the 1 chord, and the next one, you omit the fifth in the 5 chord.
Yeah, yeah. And you can think of it that way too, like omit the fifth in the 1, omit the fifth in the 5,
Okay.
or triple the root in the 1, however you want to think of it in your head,
Okay.
and those different terms are applied. But often, you know, we talk about tripling the root in the 1 and omitting the fifth in the 5. And the logic behind omitting the fifth in both of those cases has to do with the overtone series and the idea that the fifth is a prominent note in the overtone series, so you would hear it anyways. You know, you don't really need it, or you won't miss it. Let's say, you know. So in the frustrated leading tone is the fifth is not really a factor, but and I'm going to bring that. To 1, you know, then we can do that. So if we take that frustrated leading tone and then resolve it to 1, or if we omit the fifth in the 1 chord, again we can still have that. Or we can omit the fifth in the 5/7. Pretty much the same, you know, in terms of like what somebody would want to hear, or, you know, there's no preferred method really. They're all used and all work. It mostly just depends on the voice leading. So if, you know, if you really wanted to resolve the tenors up to tonic in this case, then you'd have to use one of these. You couldn't use frustrated leading tone. Let's say you had the tenor line going da 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 da, you know, and you wanted to go to do, you know, if you thought just that sounded more logical, then you would do that one. But if it didn't matter and you wanted a certain line, like a melody line in the soprano, like you wanted re to do in your cadence instead of sol to sol, you would want to use one of these, you know. So it just really depends on the line that you're in. All that makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it really should become kind of automatic for you. Like once you set up the dominant 7, it's just going to go to this, you know, once you set it up this way. So wherever the 7th is, it's going to resolve down by step. And in most cases, the leading tone is going to resolve up to tonic. Okay? Everybody good with that? All right, so now let's look at these in inversion. And interestingly, in inversion, it gets rid of this particular problem of root position. You don't really need to worry about it anymore. So when you're writing these, to resolve them in inversion, let's say we're doing 5, 6, 5 to 1, then I'm going to do something like this. Right, so if it's an A dominant 7th, C sharp would be the 3rd of the chord, and then in a 5, 6, 5, that's our bass note, right? So now if I've got this, I can again resolve all the tendency tones as I would and end up with a root position 1. It will all work out fine. So the 7th needs to resolve down by step to the 3rd of the 1 chord. The leading tone needs to resolve up to tonic. And then if I've got a root position 1 chord, The only other notes I'm missing are the fifth, which I can just maintain the common tone there, and then get the E. I get the D by moving the E down to the D, and then I've got a root position 1 chord with 2 roots, a third, and a fifth, and no need to do any weird frustrated leading tones or anything like that. You actually can do those in inversion, but you usually don't need them. And then the one thing I forgot to mention about the frustrated leading tone is that you can't do it in an exposed voice. Okay, so typically in the soprano, like if the leading tone is in the soprano, then you want that to resolve up to do. And you can't use frustrated leading tone if the leading tone is in the soprano. But if it's in an inner voice, then you can use it. So if it's an alto or tenor, you can use frustrated leading tone. If it's in the bass voice, no. You can't use the frustrated leading tone. Mostly because that would take you to a second inversion 1 chord. You don't want that. You just don't want it. You're not going to cadence to that. Okay, if it's 5/4/3, so if it looks something like this, then that would be 5/4/3. That's second inversion for a 7th chord. And again, I can resolve everything as I would want to. The 7th down by step to the 3rd of the 1 chord, the leading tone up to tonic, and then I can just maintain the common tone there and take this E down to the D, and everything works out fine. I still have a root position 1 chord with 2 roots, a 3rd, and a 5th. And I don't have to omit anything or change anything like that. And then 3rd inversion, 5/4/2, we would have something like this. Make that a little bit neater. So again, 7th of the chord, the note G is going to go down by step to the 3rd of the tonic. Let's say I maintain a common tone. Well, let's say I resolve the leading tone up to tonic, and I'm going to take that down by step. And in this case, because the 7th is in the bass, the 5/4/2 is going to resolve to a 1/6, a first inversion 1 chord, because the 3rd is the 7th of the chord is going to resolve down by step to the 3rd of the chord, and that's going to give me a first inversion triad. So 3rd inversion 7th chord always resolves to a first inversion triad. And yeah. And just notice too that there's in all of these resolutions, there's these things that play out over and over again. I mean, I was pointing out to you that the 7th goes down by step and the leading tone resolves the tonic, but we also maintain a common tone. So again, here, the 7th resolved down by step, the leading tone resolves up to tonic, but we have a common tone A, the dominant note. Same thing here, 7th resolved down by step, leading tone resolves up to tonic, but we have the common tone A. So in some ways, it's just very mechanical, actually. Resolving a dominant 7th is just, here it is, and then boom, you just move ahead with it. Like, you just know it's going to go that way. And you don't need to get creative or think about interesting solutions to do that. You just do it. And it should just work that way. Again, in music, I know we don't always want to hear that. Don't be creative. But it's kind of the process of learning this. Then once you have mastered all these things, then you can think about, well, maybe I want to do something different. How outside of the norm, but you recognize why that works and why that's going to sound different. Okay, and all of these things. Well, wait, any questions about anything so far?
So just to clarify, so for a 7th chord, the 7th is always going to go down when resolving it, and then the leading tone is always going to go up. Just to,
7th will always go down.
Yeah.
Leading tone most of the time, yes. You
but
know,
on occasion, it'll,
but occasionally you can have like a frustrated leading tone.
okay.
Yeah, so just bear that in mind.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to like incorporate, but even here, I wouldn't do it because, then I'd have 2/5, or I'd have to change this note, and I don't really want to position it anywhere else, so, yeah. Remember the idea behind all of this stuff was that to give, novice singers easy music to read, okay? Rather than people who could say, leap up a minor 7th, no, that was not something these people would normally do. But they could sing re, do pretty easily, right? And they could sing ti, do, they knew where all that stuff was. So a lot of scale passages, a lot of stepwise motion, or even holding on to a note, and just singing the same note. That's kind of how this common practice arose, is through that need to create stuff. And then, once you master that, you could break beyond it and do things that were different, but actually not always that different. Even if they were very creative, they were still creative within the confines of the rules. And then just another thing to look out for is that, so when we start talking about secondary dominance next time, all these things still apply. So even when we're talking about chords that are outside of the key, these rules about voice leading for 7th chords still apply. Okay? And especially the tendency tones, they make a big difference. All right, everybody good with that stuff? Okay. So let's talk about the other 7th chords. So now, if I take, we'll use D major still. I'm going to use the D major scale. But instead of just focusing, I want to put those closer together so I can talk about minor too. Instead of just focusing on the dominant, we can actually build 7th chords on every scale degree. So instead of just triads, we can think about 7th chords. And I won't build it on the 1 chord again because I've already got one on the 1 chord. So again, it's still tonic, supertonic, mediant, subdominant. There's my dominant 7th. Submediant, and then the leading tone. And all of those are 7th chords, but they're of different qualities. Okay, so if I build a 7th chord on the tonic, D, F sharp, A, and C sharp, what kind of a 7th chord is that?
Say that again. I wasn't listening on that.
Well, what are our 5 types of 7th chord? Let's review that. There's a major 7th, right?
Yeah, so major 7th. The first
Yeah.
one.
There's a major 7th, which is a major triad and a major 7th, right? That's the definition of a major 7th. It's a major triad and a major Then there's the dominant seventh, which we already know is a major triad and a minor seventh, right? We've got that. There's the minor seventh, which is a minor triad and a minor seventh. There's the half diminished, also sometimes called minor seventh flat five, but in traditional it's usually called half diminished, so we'll use that term. And then there's fully diminished or just diminished. I'm going to call it fully now, but so those are our five commonly used seventh chords within traditional harmony. And in fact, even the major seventh is actually not often used in traditional harmony, but it's possible. There are other types of seventh chords. So some people will talk about like an augmented triad and a major seventh, or a minor triad with a major seventh. But those are not used in traditional harmony. Those are used in jazz and stuff, but not in traditional harmony. So yeah, the seventh chord built on the one chord is a major seventh because it's a major triad and a major seventh. And so the way we notate that is with a capital M and then a seven like that. Okay, what about the seventh chord here? What kind of seventh chord is on the two chord? We've got E, G, B, D, all natural notes, and
-7.
a minor seventh. Yeah, because it's a minor triad and a minor seventh. I'm going to erase the seventh there. So this is a minor triad and a minor seventh. And when you have a minor triad and a minor seventh, that's our definition of a minor seventh chord. So so for that we use lowercase Roman numeral to denote the minorness of it. And then we put just a little superscript seventh, just like we do with the dominant seventh. So this is the notation for a minor seventh. Okay, what about the three? What kind of a seventh chord is that?
Is it a half diminished?
Minor triad.
Yeah, F sharp, A, C sharp, minor triad. F sharp to E.
I need a piano.
Use your mental piano, but okay. F sharp to E. It's a minor seventh.
Yeah.
And it would be F sharp to E sharp would be major seventh, right? I don't have it on the keyboard, but or F sharp to E sharp, F sharp to E natural, minor seventh. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the same thing. Just a lowercase Roman numeral 3 to denote the fact that it's a minor seventh, and then the superscript 7. What about this one, the 4? Major 7, yeah. So major triad, GBD, major 7th, G to F sharp is a major 7th, so again, that little m, little superscript m, little 7, and that. And then this is our dominant 7th, so that's cool, right? That's major triad minor 7th. What about this one?
Minor triad with
A minor triad with a B to A natural.
is a minor.
Minor
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So minor 7th, right, overall. Yeah. And then finally, this last one C sharp, E, G, B natural. So what kind of a seventh chord is that?
I know the seventh, if I remember, there was a diminished, if I'm right? Am I wrong?
Well, the triad is diminished.
Yeah.
Okay, but what about C sharp to B? Is that a diminished seventh or a minor seventh?
That's a, which, sorry, what?
C sharp to B. What kind of a seventh is that?
Minor.
A minor seventh. So this is our half diminished, right? The triad is diminished, C sharp, E, G, but the seventh is minor. And so it's only half. That's why we call it half diminished, because the triad is diminished, but the seventh is not. When we get into minor, we'll have a fully diminished seventh, where the seventh is diminished, the triad is diminished, and the seventh is diminished, right? But this is only half diminished, so we use the little circle with a line through it, and then the superscript 7.
Okay, so half diminished is a -7 with a flat 5.
Flat 5, yeah. That's also, so you'll see in chord symbols this all the time. In fact, if you're looking at a chart, you won't see this that much. Like, you won't see that. I want to say never, but probably not never. In some older charts, you know, you might see this. But nowadays, this is by far the preferred symbol, like chord symbol. Okay? So you might see this, but this is more likely. In terms of chord symbols above the staff, right? Now, in terms of Roman numeral analysis, we always use like the lowercase with the half diminished symbol. So in traditional classical, you know, Roman numeral analysis, it's this one, but in jazz commercial, it's -7 flat 5. Okay, and you should know both of those. I mean, you have to talk to both people, you know. Even if you're like, I'm just studying classical. Somebody's going to tell you -7 flat 5, and you're going to say, well, what does that mean? You know, and vice versa. Like if you're talking to a jazz person, you say half diminished, they might know what you're talking about, but they might also go, huh? And then you have to say -7 flat 5. Oh, okay, I understand that.
So I have a question.
Mhm.
So for a major 7-1, for like 1 M7,
Mhm.
do you always have to put this in the M, or can you just put the 7?
Most of the time, again, in classical, we put the big M to denote major seventh, because there's the idea that it could be confused with this one, the dominant seventh. But I have seen like just this in some textbooks even. And the idea would be, well, if it's a tonic seventh, you know that it's a major seventh, right? That's just assumed.
Because the reason why I'm asking is because I know majority of the time, like if it's a capital Roman numeral, it's already implied like, oh, it's going to be a major.
Right.
So that's why I was asking. I was like, do you have to put the M if it's already going to be implied as a major?
I think it's better to be clear, you know, to do this, just to see, because it's possible to build a dominant. Like if I did C natural instead, this would be a dominant seventh. However, if I did that, that would be a chromatic alteration, right? And that would actually be a secondary dominant that I was talking about earlier in class. That would have a different implication. So in traditional harmony, we would use something entirely different from this, from the 1/7. We talked about it in terms of its function, of where it's going to. But again, like I have seen that, because you're right, like if it's written like this, like, well, it must be a major seventh, you know, if it's in the key of D, it's a 1. So, yeah.
So basically, it just depends on the context.
It is, but the context is, the context is important.
Okay.
And what I will say next is that these 2 7th chords are rarely used in traditional classical harmony. These
Major
major
seventh?
7ths, yeah. Because they were just seen as being too dissonant. And if you listen to, you know, like if you listen to a D major 7, that sounds very pretty, right? That's a nice chord. But when you listen to just the 7th itself, that sounds dissonant, right? And so that's what they were really thinking. Remember, this comes out of a contrapuntal tradition, which it was voice against voice. So like root to 3rd, root to 5th, and then root to 7th. That was too dissonant for their ears at that time, you know. So major seventh. So it was just avoided, and if it was incorporated, it was more often treated very much like a non-chord tone. So like, and Mozart would do this sometimes, Beethoven too, although even more complicated, but let's say you had like a dominant seventh, and you were resolving it to one, you might hear Mozart go, which is a major seventh, but then resolve that up to tonic, that seventh up to tonic. So you hear it for a second, and you're like, and then resolve. So the home was to not be on a seventh chord. You might hear it. So in other words, they wouldn't hear that as a seventh chord. They would hear that as a non-chord tone, like a retardation that was resolved. Does that make sense? You know, in their ears, that was different. They wouldn't just use it as a chord. So there's very few instances in classical harmony where either of these are used as a chord, that you would hear them as a single harmony rather than, oh, that note is a non-chord tone which is going to go somewhere else. Okay?
A fully diminished is a minor triad, or is it a?
Fully diminished is a diminished triad
Is
and
it
a
diminished
diminished
seventh?
seventh. Yeah. And we'll get into that next with minor. Now, one point. So before we do the good news is that all of this is the same no matter what key you're in. So if I'm in C major, the 1 is still a major 7, the 2 is still a minor 7, the 7 is still a half diminished 7. If I'm in G major, if I'm in A flat, if I'm in E flat, all the same, all the time, okay? So you don't have to look at each one and go, okay, well, let's see, that's E, G, B, that's a minor triad, E to D, that's a minor 7th. If you build a diatonic 7th chord on the second step of the scale, it's always going to be a minor 7th, no matter what major key you're in. Okay, we're going to get into minor next, but this goes for major. Okay, so that you can just sort of assume as long as we're in the key, there's no chromatic alterations, then we're talking about minor. Okay, so now in a minor key, and we'll use D minor, so we'll use the parallel minor, so that we have that kind of relationship between both. If I build a D major scale, and I put 7 chords on every one, get another set of 7s. And because, as I put forward before, very often the harmonic minor form is used, I'm going to make some alterations here, okay? This is not considered chromatic. This is not considered outside of the key. If I'm using the harmonic form, that's still considered within the key. So, in D minor, the 7th step of the scale is C, and if I want to make that harmonic, I would sharp the C. So I'm going to put a C sharp here. Then I'm also going to put that here. But I'm not going to do it here in the 3 chord because that would create an augmented triad, which is not part of our 7th vocabulary, at least in tradition. And I'm not going to do it here because that would be a minor triad with a major 7th, and that would also be weird. Okay? Not that those aren't possible harmonic structures, like a minor triad, D minor, with a major 7th. Actually a chord that's used, but not in traditional classical harmony, okay? So then we end up with these, again, doing these, but let's take a look at the qualities. So if I've got a minor triad with this seventh, what kind of a seventh is the one chord then? So one minor triad, D to C, minor seventh, so it's a minor seventh, right? Okay, what about this one, the two? What kind of a seventh is that?
Minor triad.
Actually not a minor triad.
Yeah.
Don't forget the key signature.
Oh, diminished triad.
Diminished triad, yeah.
With a major seven.
No, minor seventh.
Oh God.
E to D natural, minor seventh.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, diminished triad minor seventh is a half diminished, right? So in minor, the two is the half diminished. Okay. What about this seventh chord? Major seventh, yeah. So major triad, F A C, major seventh, F to E, major seventh. What about this one? Minor seventh, yeah, minor triad, G, B flat, D, minor seventh, G to F, minor seventh. This is the dominant seventh. And again, it's the same chord here and here. And the reason we use the harmonic is to bring that kind of like, that dominant seventh chord into the minor triad. So it has a similar thing to the major key, similar strength to it. Okay, what about this one?
Also major?
Also major, yeah. You like your major seventh, right? And then what about this one? Again, don't forget key signature. Well, C sharp, E, G. What kind of a triad is that?
Is a diminished triad.
Diminished triad, yeah. Because if I build a major, like you want to think of it like if I build a major triad on C sharp, it would be C sharp, E sharp, G sharp. But then we have lowered third, lowered fifth, so that's diminished, right? So diminished triad, and then C sharp to B flat.
Is also diminished, right?
It's also, diminished seventh, yeah. So this would be a fully diminished seventh. And for that, we use the circle without the slash and then the superscript seven. Oops, why did I do this way? This should have been, sorry.
Copied it down also without the minute.
Yeah. I don't know why I was thinking B at that point. Because that root is not B. Maybe I was thinking B minor or something, I'm not sure, but that's. Okay. The reason I was thinking that is because this one then I would call C sharp dim 7 or C sharp with a little circle 7. And actually, this one with the circle is more common, you know. I mean, well, this is still the most common, spelling out the word dim. Again, in commercial chord charts, that's the standard today, but you will see this one somewhat more commonly in terms of chord qualities. So in a minor key, although with the harmonic alteration, minor seventh on the 1, a half diminished on the 2, a major seventh on the 3, a minor seventh on the 4, a dominant seventh because of the raised 7th step of the scale, a major seventh on the 6th, and then a fully diminished 7th. And those are this, again, the standard qualities, you know, like if I did something like put a C sharp there, I'd end up with an augmented triad and a major 7th, and it's a possibility, but not very likely, and it would probably be treated, again, more like a non-chord tone than as an actual harmony. And similar to the major, these major 7ths were just not often used. So the really important ones coming out of both of these are the 2/7, the dominant 7th, of course, the 6/7, and the 7/7. And the same is kind of true in minor. This one, the 2/7, the dominant 7th, and the fully diminished 7th. The other ones are just don't show up that often. I'm not saying don't ever, never, whatever, but just kind of like not so much in terms of traditional classical harmony. And so those are the ones you want to work with. And most of it's because they have a strong relationship to the tonic. So if you're talking about like the 2/7, well, the 2/7 will likely go, just like the chord progression chart, 2 goes to 5, well, the 2/7 will go to 5/7, and the 5/7 will go to 1. Everybody okay with that? Okay, I'll branch off sideways and then come back for a second. So here we have this chord here built on the 7th step, right? And here I've got C sharp, E, G, and B flat. But if I don't put the C sharp there, then what is this?
Major chord with a diminished, fully diminished 7.
No, the 7th isn't diminished anymore, because
Three.
right. So
What?
major triad,
Oh,
C, E,
okay,
G,
okay.
B flat, minor 7th.
Minor 7.
So this
that's
is-
a major, minor.
Yeah, major, minor, or a dominant
Oh,
7th, right? A C dominant 7th. And so that would look something like this. Now, the reason I bring that up, so C7, right? C dominant 7th chord is the dominant in what key? Well, you're addicted to that keyboard. You gotta get your visual keyboard.
I know.
Yes, F. C is the dominant key of F. Is F related in any way to this key signature?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same key signature, right? I should have put the little D here, but. So, F major and D minor are relative major and minor. And if I use this unaltered 7, like the 7/7 unaltered, that's going to tend to want to go to F, right? And the reason I bring that up is because very often this chord is used as a way of modulating or changing keys to the relative major. So I'm in D minor, I use this chord, which strongly implies a resolution to an F chord, and then I continue on in F. So there are these the alteration.
Need a second
I
to
think-
state that in a.
Okay.
So can I ask to see if I understand?
Yeah.
So if you're using, because I know what you mean is like, this is a secondary dominant, right? Or-
It almost
You're
is like a
talking about-
secondary dominant,
So
yeah.
basically, if we're using that, major 7 chord.
Was it dominant seven?
Yeah,
It's a
dominant 7.
Yeah,
Basically, that's going to end up resolving into the modulation of going into a different key signature of
Relative key.
the relative.
it can take us into a different key, or it could just temporarily tonicize this
Mhm.
chord, right? So, and that's where, we haven't talked about secondary dominance yet, but if it just goes to F for like it goes C7 to F major triad, and then goes back into D minor, we would call it a secondary dominant. Its function is just temporarily tonicizing F, right?
Okay.
But if it's C7 to F, and then we continue on an F with like a B flat chord, and an F chord, and a G minor chord, and then another C7, and oh, okay, well, now we're in the key of F, we're definitely there. Then that's a modulation. So it kind of depends, and even the secondary dominant sometimes we've talked about is like small, like tiny modulations. So it depends on the length that we spend at the time of F. But I just wanted to bring that up because, that's this whole thing about minor. With the harmonic and like the raised seventh, that it's to pull us back towards the tonic in D minor. When we eliminate that and use something like this, it tends to pull us towards a relative major. And so either one of these you might find, if you're in D minor, strictly in D minor, then this is the chord you're going to end up with, this fully diminished seventh chord. But if you're fudging back and forth between major and minor, which composers sometimes do, then you could end up with this seventh chord. And that's, like I mentioned this in harmony before, like this kind of like, minor is tricky, minor is flexible, changeable. And so you have to be careful about what's really going on in minor sometimes. Okay, everybody okay with all of this? All right. So now, if we have these chords, I could erase this, right? Okay. In using these chords, we tend to use them similarly to the dominant seventh. So if we use these new chords, we still follow the same rules that we had before. So, if I'm in D major, and I'm going to write a 2/7, then it's going to go to 5, or maybe 5/7, we can talk about that, but it's going to go, just if you remember the chord progression diagram of the triad, like 2 goes to 5, right? Or 6 goes to 2 goes to 5. So we'll use the seventh chords in the same fashion. So a 2 chord will very likely go to a 5 chord, and when I voice that 2 chord, the same sorts of tendencies will take place, although with a minor seventh we don't have a leading tone here, but we do have a seventh of the chord, right? That note D is the seventh of the chord, and so that will tend to resolve down by step to the third of the next chord. Okay, so as I go to my A chord, I'll get something like that. And then I would likely go on to 1, so I would do that similarly. And so the same principle applies. Does that make sense? In the use of these seventh chords, if I'm going to use a 2/7, then the seventh of the chord will resolve down by step to the third of the next chord. Or
Are we using just the progression that we've done before? You're just taking a little, just this whole 2-5-1 thing?
yeah, it's a progression.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm wondering why you picked those particular.
Well, because it's just kind of common and
Okay.
easy. Yeah. But again, like, see, I guess, or if I didn't have, see, we did this in harmony, right? We wrote 2-5-1. Right? So now all I'm doing is just adding a seventh, and the idea would be that maybe that seventh has a little stronger pull towards the so that seventh we want minor triad, resolving to A major triad, resolving to 1. Or if I do E minor 7th, then we want to hear resolution. Right? So it has just a little more power, and the same would be true if I backed it up a bit. If I said, okay, well now I want to write 6/7 to 2 to 5 to 1. The 6th chord would be a B. It would be a B minor triad, and if I wanted to make it a 7th, I could just put the 7th there. And then when I resolved it to the E triad, I would do something like this. And then when I went on to the A, I would probably do something like this. And when I went on to the 1, I would likely do something like this. And again, the idea would be using a 6/7 here would just pull me a little bit stronger to 2 and to the 5. But the same chord progression will apply. 6 goes to 2, goes to 5, goes to 1. And also, so if I was to create a chain of 7ths, then you have to be a little careful. And what I would likely do is omit the 5th. You have to kind of alternate between having a 5th and omitting the 5th and having a 5th. Because of that propensity, like if 7 chords and you're going to follow the tendency tones, then you can have parallel 5ths or consecutive 5ths, even in a sequence like this. So you have to omit the 5th in every other one in order to make it work. And so I would end up, like if I was going to make this a 7th chord, then I would likely have to omit the 5th in the 1 chord in order to make all that work out in a kind of chain sequence. So with 5th, without 5th, with 5th, without 5th. And if I backed it up again and used the 3/7, I do something like that. So these kind of sequential 7th chord progressions, you actually have to do that in order to make the voice lead like that, right? But again, the idea would be that instead of, if I just do triad, so 6 chord to 2 triad to dominant triad to 1 chord, that's cool, but if I want to make it a little bit more interesting, 6/7 to 1/2/7 to 5/7 to 1. And it just has a little bit more stronger pull, plus everything sounds a little bit jazzier. Okay, any questions about that? All right, one more thing in terms of resolving the 7th is the half diminished and then the fully diminished, and then we'll do some analysis. So if I'm writing this chord, the half diminished in major to 1, which is where it's likely to go, then I'm still going to follow the tendency tone thing, okay? So I'm still going to want to have the leading tone resolve up to tonic. I'm going to want to have the fa to mi thing. Remember, this is part of like an A dominant 7th, right? When I had the G in there, it was fa to mi, so I want that to resolve. And then in order to make up a properly voiced 1 chord, I tones, but I still have the seventh of the chord. So in this case, the C sharp half diminished, the seventh of the chord is resolving down by step. So that's still happening. And then if I'm thinking about a minor key, like D minor, it'll work in a similar fashion. So if I'm going to write in D minor, the 7 diminished to 1, and I'm going to have the same sort of thing. Oh, actually, let me voice this differently. Just so we can see how the tunes and tones still play out in the same fashion. So still leading tone up to tonic, still the 7th down by step, still the fa to the mi, and then we'll just get the other D there. So this leading tone resolves up to tonic, the 7th of the chord, the B flat, goes down by step to the A, the G goes down, like that's that same fa to mi that's taking place in major and minor, and then we just move the E to the D to get the other root of the chord. So in these leading tone chords, both the half diminished leading tone chord in the major and the fully diminished leading tone chord in the minor, the principles are still the same, right? The leading tone still goes up to the tonic, the 7th of the chord resolves down by step, and because it has the fa in it, it tends to resolve down to the 3rd of the chord. I'm going to put the 7th resolving down by step.
Trying to copy them.
Okay. Why don't you guys copy while I bring this up? See if I can get projection working here. So any questions about that so far? No?
Not yet.
Yeah. I think, I mean, even before probably in harmony, but you can start to see how fluency in keys is really important, right? Just every major and minor key, knowing them and knowing the chords in them is just so important. Yeah, it's something of us, because like in 200, we talk about these isolated structures like A 7th chord or A triad, and it's very like this, you know, but you have to think about the key, like an A major triad in the key of D minor is the 5, you know, in the key of A major is the 1. This ability to think about these contexts is really important and understand them. That's what we mean by fluency, you know. Like when we talk about fluency in languages, we're talking about, you know, being able to travel to Spain and speak Spanish, and travel to Japan and speak Japanese, and, you know, travel to the United States and speak English, you know, or maybe another part, travel to Scotland and speak English, but it's not the same English that everybody else is speaking, you know. that kind of ability is important, right? And the same is true in music, like to be able to travel to D major and speak D major, be able to travel to A flat and speak A flat. You have to kind of be able to work with those changes, different contexts. Yeah. So let's do some analysis now. Yay! Well, analysis is part of this fluency, right? Like if, if I say write something, that's one thing, right? But if I say, now here's some writing, let's analyze it, let's take a look at it, that's also part of the fluency, developing fluency. Speaking is another part. So when you sing, or you play guitar, oh, that's a D minor triad, okay. Or D minor chord, you probably think we're playing a triad, or that, or whatever. Like we play piano, like you were talking about playing piano, Stephanie, that's also part of it. That's your speaking fluency, And don't let those opportunities go. Don't think, well, I'm just playing guitar. No, you're playing guitar and you're playing all these harmonies that we've talked about. Very likely you played, like a D minor 7 or something like that. So you have to start looking for it.
Look for the wrong one.
This whole dongle thing, I really do not like it. There's stuff here we don't even need. There we go. Okay. I've got copies for you guys.
I only have one. That's all I have.
I have a pencil.
Shopping on the sensory. Stephanie,
I know.
pencil instead.
Okay, so we'll analyze, we'll do one phrase in this, so we'll just do it here.
There's so many.
There you go. That's what I was thinking.
Oh, yeah.
It's like
Well,
one book.
We'll kind of like jump around a bit here, maybe, depending on our time constraints, maybe just jump to like, where is the seventh chord that we're looking for here? But let's start off with this one, and let's just do the whole first phrase here. This one's pretty straightforward. It's all simple key, half notes. But what key are we in?
Brave.
Wow. What key are we in?
G.
One
Yeah,
sharp.
G.
G, yeah. We're in G major. And again, if we want to look at like the first chord, which is a G major triad, the cadence point, G major triad, the final cadence point, G major triad. So all indications are that we're in the key of G major. So we will put G. Okay. And I already said this is a G major triad, so we'll just say that's a one chord. But what about the next one? What is that? When we've got D and A and D and F sharp. Five, yeah. In the key of G, that the D would be the dominant note, and it's just a triad. There's no seventh in there. It's D, A, D, F sharp. In fact, it's a perfectly voiced, right? Reposition 5 chord, 2 Ds, F sharp and A, so that's 5. One, 6, good, yeah, so we've got B and G and D and G. Again, those are all part of the G major triad. That's cool. So, but the B is the lowest sounding pitch, so that would be a 1, 6. Okay, now we have C and G and E and A. So,
Before.
you would think,
No.
but it's not.
Really? No.
Oh, so, let's look at those notes. So let's take treble clef. I've got a C, I've got a G, I've got an E, and I've got an A. Looks like a 7 chord, right? In inversion. So what is the root? A, yeah. Remember, if we scrunch all the notes together and put them within an octave, and we get this kind of second relationship, the upper note is the 7th of the chord, because if I put the A down there, and then I put the C and the E and the G above that, I get A. So A is the root. So yeah, so in the key of G, that's a 2, and because it's got the G on top, it's a 7.
Now, how are we going to, because if I look at it, I'm going to think of the 4 chord.
Well, and you know,
That is a good question. How do you like know if it's going to be an inversion versus a
Well,
position?
because this music is very chordal, clearly, right? Like we're looking at harmony, 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 harmony. If there was some other like melodic line confusing things, you know, like maybe the A was just, it was A and then G, you know, like a quarter note A, quarter note G, you could say, well, that's a 4 chord with an A, you know, as a passing tone. You might want to, or a neighboring tone. But because it's presented like this, and what you're going to hear, like when that is performed,
Oh, you know because of the A.
so you hear this, and then this, and then this, and then this. It's not this, it's this.
I just realized I was an A, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just stupid question.
Well, but I really actually do want to make the connection between hearing and analyzing. Like
Yeah.
that's part of this idea of analyzing is you're trying to get at what you hear. And if you're hearing 4 there, you're close. I'm actually saying you're not far away. It's what we call a predominant function, right? Because the next thing is going to be the dominant. The next thing is going to be a 5 chord. So all these chords, 4 and 2 and now 2, 7, all have a predominant function. They can precede the dominant. So when you see, like, you could even say, when I see a dominant, I can look ahead and see what is it 2 or 4? Is it some sort of 2? And having the A in there is one of the usual suspects. So yes, it's a 2/7. It's in first inversion with the C on the bottom. So that's then 2, 6, 5. Right? For our 7th chords, root, first, second, and third, I'm going to do this with a 2.27, 2, 6, 5, 2, 4, 3, 2, 4, 2, right? Those were our inversion symbols for 7th chords, for open numerals. So that applies to the dominant 7th, and applies to the 2. So this would be a 2, 6, 5. Okay. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Now, just again, notice that the 7th of that chord is G, and it resolved down by step to the 3rd of the 5 chord. Okay, 5 chord, I already said it. I need to ask you, like, what is the next chord? It's the 5 chord. But what is the one after that?
A 6 chord.
A 6 chord, yeah. So we call that what? What do we call it when we go from 5 to 6? There's a specific name for that. For the progression. You expect 5 to go to 1,
Yeah.
but 5 goes to 6 instead. What is it? Deceptive, yeah. Deceptive progression. Or deceptive cadence. depending on what, in this case, it's just a progression, because it's just 5 to 6, and then it moves on back to 5 again.
That's when the sixth chord delays the, is that it? No.
Yeah, it's sort of a
Yeah,
delay,
something like
you
that.
know,
It
it's a,
delays what was it, the arrival of the 5, if I'm right, something like that.
well, I think you're thinking of the cadential 6/4. The cadential 6/4
Yeah, I know.
delays the arrival of the 5.
Okay.
This is a deceptive in that, you know, it is kind of a delaying action though, but it's deceptive in that you're going 5 to 6, then you're gonna go back to 5, and then to 1. And so then the 5 chord is next, and then we've got 1 here. And notice a couple things. One, in the 6th chord, the 3rd is doubled, not the root. It's a root position 6th chord, but the 3rd is doubled because that's the G, which is the root of the 1 chord, right? So in a deceptive progression, typically the 3rd of the 6th chord is doubled because it's like, you know, we're heading towards a G chord, so you get a little bit more G, but not complete G. So the 3rd of the 6th chord is doubled. It's not a rule, because it can be done just a regular standard 6th chord, but it's typically done that way because of the tendency tones. Again, like normally you probably want to take this down to the E and have a unison E there, but you can resolve the leading tone, the F sharp, up to the tonic and get the double 3rd, and then that still works in terms of voice leading. The other thing is that in our chord progression diagram, 6 doesn't go to 5, right? 6 goes to 2, and really nothing. 6 goes to 2 or 6 goes to 4, but not to 5. But the idea was that in a deceptive progression, the 6 then becomes like a stand-in for the 1 chord. And so then you can go like 5, 1, 5, 1, right? And so this is a sort of stand-in for the 1. You can use it that way too. That's the only time you can go from 6 to 5, is if you progress deceptively to 6, then you can use the 6 as a 1 and go back to 5. But otherwise not, okay? So you can go 6 to 5 just any day of the week. Okay? So, but the main import here is this like 2, 6, but again, if it was just a 2 triad, it would be no different, just the 7th on top. All right, let's look at the next one.
That's a 4. Oh, wait, what? Are we not doing the rest of it?
Yeah, but that's,
Okay.
we're just gonna, what we're gonna find,
That's like.
well, wait a minute, let me go back. Oh, you wanted to do the rest of it?
We found the 4. No, we can move on. Isn't it a 4?
Yeah, oh, you wanted the 4.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, all right.
He's like, I need my 4.
Yeah. Okay, 4.
Now we can move on.
Okay, you don't want to find the other 2, 7?
He's like,
Found it. The
Yeah.
second last measure for
Yeah.
week.
2, 7, because again, it's the same voicing, same chord. 2, 7, 2, 5, 7.
Are we good?
Okay, let's go on. Fluency in keys. So now we're traveling to another key.
What was that though? Okay.
That was G major. Now we're in E major. Ooh. Wait a minute, do you like E major numbers as a guitarist? No? Okay.
I like E major. I
A lot
like
of
playing
people-
songs in E major on the guitar.
So a lot of people say guitarists like sharp keys, right? Like A major, E major, that's the way it's tuned, you know. But I'm always a little suspicious of that. B major is a deadly key in any instrument. I think even on guitar, I don't like B major, so. Okay. So, now this is a,
yeah, we don't have that one.
oh, we don't? You don't?
No.
Oh, wait a minute, no, that's right, I skipped that one, never mind. I wanted to skip that one, because it's just another 2, 7. You have Blue Moon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's look at Blue Moon. So this is a Richard Rodgers song, and I put this in to kind of like include something a little more contemporary. Oh, it's probably 100 years old, right?
Yeah, I think my grandpa used to.
Yeah, very likely. I wonder what year this was written, but yeah, it's probably 100 years old.
I can hear it.
It's still a classic, though. You guys know this one, right?
Yeah.
I know.
You saw me standing alone.
I just cited the thing.
Yeah. It's a very nice song. Yeah.
Is that it?
Mhm, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And it's a very, well, okay, I mean, it's very, it's a standard, it's considered one of those like torch ballads, you know, that like a lounge singer would sing all the time, you know, that sort of thing. But also, it's got a very standard chord progression. It's considered a classic of this kind of chord progression. So, what key are we in?
Yeah, E flat.
Yeah,
Making sure.
you don't need to
Making sure.
Well, of course, three flats would be E flat major or C minor. As we look at it, we tend not to see like B naturals, which would be the raised leading tone. That would be one clue of C minor. But also here, B flat, A flat, D, F, B flat, B flat. That's all B flat dominant seventh, which makes more sense in E flat. It's part of C minor, but it makes much more sense in E flat. So I would analyze it in E flat. And then, as I just said, this is 5/7. We'll just give you that. So now when we analyze this piano music, like in piano music, typically it's the left hand, the bass part, that's giving you the chords and the harmony, and the right hand that's giving you the melody, right? Now you can see in this piano texture, we do have the melody, in other words, the singing part being mirrored in the piano part. That's so the right hand of the piano is playing the melody, but there's also some chords there, and we can look at those two to give us the harmony, but I want you to see that distinction between melody line in the piano part. This is all melody, so we could even almost ignore the very top of the piano part. But what we want to look at is the notes in the bass part, you know, this kind of thing, and think about them in context. Another thing is in piano, so like, well, let's see, so we've got E, B flat, and G, right? Or, yeah, E flat, B flat, G. What chord is that in E flat? E flat major, which is 1, right? Now, if the part was just written like this, that would be okay, but it's just more interesting to do. Right? I mean, it's just a little bit more interesting rhythmically. So my point is that although the bottom part here might look rhythmically like it's not a chord, it is a chord. E flat, B flat, and G is a chord. And we can think of it that way. So when we analyze it, that's all one chord. Everything here, all this stuff, this is all one. So we would just analyze it as one. And then we, as long as it's all one, we just go until the harmony changes. And one of the reasons I bring that up, because we were talking about the fine earlier, right? Like, you don't need to analyze every single chord in piano music. Like, you don't need to analyze this note and then this note or something like that. Like, this is a 1 and this is a 1/6. Because it's all the same harmony. And even to the point, like with that bass line that's given here, I would very likely use pedal on that. Right? So, that note is still sound, that E flat is still sound, so there's no change of inversion. It's going to be a root position E flat flat chord that whole time. So try when you're, especially when you're analyzing piano music, to look at the, you know the word Gestalt means? The whole,
Yeah.
you know,
So we're,
Gestalt, it's a German word.
It's a guy, right? I know.
Oh, like the
It's
Geist?
psychology.
That's a little bit broader term, but you know, like
No, how did you say it?
Gestalt.
Okay, he's a branch of psychology.
Yeah, there is a, yeah.
And that's what it is just to look at things as a whole.
Yeah. Okay, rather than like individual
Yeah.
behaviors or
Yeah.
something like that. Okay, yeah. Yeah, the Gestalt means the whole, you know, so like if I'm looking at the whole of this piece, you know, I could look at actually, it's in E flat or something like that. That's more like a larger view. And then this note is E flat, that's a smaller view, you know. So when you're looking at piano music, try just not to focus on, you know, this note or this note or this note, but the Gestalt, the harmony, shall we say? Because it's very, very common in piano music to take a single harmony and using what we call figuration, make something more out of it, you know, make something beyond just a single harmony. Again, it would be okay if I just played chords like this, you know. But this is kind of boring, right? Like, so we want to hear some rhythm. Okay. So we change here. What is that? 6, yeah. C minor triad, good. And again, for the whole measure, it's just that. And then what about here? Now again, ignore the 8 notes at first. Just look at this lower part. A 2. But anything special about this 2? Anything significant?
Is there a 7 somewhere? Wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, the E on top.
Yeah. And so that's 7th, or 14th, if you will.
No, thank you.
If you want to look between here and here. Yeah. But yeah, so we have F and A flat, and, I'm sorry, F and C and A flat, which is the 2 chord, but this is the 7th of that chord. And so, and its significance is it's a half note, right? So it's not just like a passing note, it's there the whole time. And so I would call that a 2/7. Root position, because the F is the lowest sounding pitch, and again, it's going to ring through. And a 7th, because the E flat is also going to be there the whole time. And again, you're likely to hear it that way. You're likely to hear, when you hear that chord, so when you have that, sorry. And then we go to the next one. Which is, so B flat, A flat, B flat, D,
5,
5,
7.
7. Yeah, and also here. So I would call it 5/7.
You good?
Yeah, but hang on a second. 2 things. 1, 7th resolves down by step. In the 5/7, what's the 5th of a B flat 7? What's the 5th of a B flat dominant 7? What note? B
So
flat.
what?
B flat dominant 7. What is the 5th of that chord? F. Do you see that note anywhere near here? No. So it's like, remember I was talking about root position 7th chord to 7th chord? You're going to have to omit the 5th somewhere. So even Richard Rodgers is using common practice harmony in his music in order to avoid parallel fifths. The other thing, so if we go on, but I just wanted to, this progression, so we start off with a dominant seventh, but then we get the one, right, and then we get the sixth, and then the seventh chord, and then five, seven, then we're going to go back to one, but that progression then, 1, 6, you've heard that before, right? It's a very common progression, that 6 to 2 to 5 to 1. So I just want to bring that up too. In fact, it's like a cliche, right? We hear it all the time. Okay. What chord? 1. And then 6, 2, 7, right? 5,
7.
7. Stephanie's gonna sing it, but with the
There's the chord.
5, 1. Oops, 5, 1, 6, 2, 7, 5, 7, 1, 6. Oh, wait a minute. I just thought of something else. B flat in the context of this chord would be the 7th.
Oh.
Oh. So is that a 6, 7?
Well, what do you think? How do you hear it? Yeah, I don't really hear it still.
Because the only thing that's sustaining that is the pedal, right? Because otherwise you're breaking off.
Yeah, well, the piano is holding that note. Now the singer is singing it, which might help.
That might affect it
Yeah,
and make it sound like 6, 7.
yeah. I think it could go either way. It's probably, and it does also resolve down by step.
So 6 in brackets, 7.
Okay. Right, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, she's going to look at that and say, what is this that we've never seen before? Bracket 7.
To tell you the truth, I mean, if we're going to be consistent, it probably should be a 7. Because if we're going to 6, 7, 2, 7, 5, 7, 1, 6, 7, 2, 7, 5, 7, like it would just make sense in terms of a harmonic progression. Yeah. Okay. Let's see what else have we got. Do something different. This next one. This is the same old 4 and 2, 7. Can we move on? Let's move on to let's skip the next one, the string quartet one, and go on to the next piano one. Stension.
I don't know how to say it.
Stension.
Is it German?
Hmm?
Is it German?
Yeah.
Sound man. Sound man.
So I think the A with umlaut is so stension.
Oh, I thought it makes it an R sound.
Stanchion.
I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I couldn't even say the name of my piece for the final project. And then you said it, and I was like, oh, there we go.
Well, you used the German word for, was it ladybug or was it
No,
something else? Some other insect, I think.
Queen bee.
Oh, the queen bee. Yeah. Yeah, König.
But then.
Beinen. Kunigan, yeah.
There you
Yeah,
go.
Bynum Kunigan, yeah. And it's funny, I had to look up Bynum. Kunigan I know is queen, you know, but Bynum, oh, could it be? A new tradition. Well, they were after different insects. Praying mantis. Aphid. Okay, let's analyze this one. So this one is in what key?
F major.
No.
Oh, no. Oh, no, it's not.
Oh, yeah, I see some extra
D minor.
D minor. Yeah. Well,
That was my
again,
next
because,
guess.
so yes, F major, D minor, one flat, F major, D minor, but D minor triad here, C sharp over here, probably D minor, right? And as we analyze it, we'll see that everything makes sense in D minor. Yeah. Oh, okay, so D minor. So I already said D minor triad there, right? And again, in piano music, you know, we're just looking at the gestalt of the measure. And so D, D, A, D, D, F, A, D, D, F, A, D, all D minor triad stuff. So no need to analyze changes in inversion or anything like that. It's all just one chord. And if you look at the whole piece, you can see that that's just an accompaniment pattern, right? So this measure, same thing, this measure, same thing, or similar, this measure, same thing. It's just an accompaniment pattern that's going to play out through the rest of the piece, which again is what pianists often do. Okay, so now what about this measure? What chord is that?
Is it 6?
C6?
Yeah, it's a 6. Never mind.
Yes.
Just,
I'm just messing with you. Yeah, because it's B flat, D, and D and F. So all the notes are there eventually. B flat, D, and F. And that's a B flat major triad. And in D minor, that's 6. So this would be a 6 chord. Now, in a minor key, the 6 is a major triad, right? So make sure that you use uppercase Roman numerals for that. And then we've got this one.
Is it 4? No.
The gestalt.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's a version on one side.
No, I don't know.
Well, G in the bass, right? So G.
B and D,
B flat and D, so
and then an
B
E.
flat and D,
So
and
we
then
got
an
an
E.
E chord. So
Mhm.
we've got a
Two
2/7, but inversion. So
But inversion.
2, 6, 5.
2, 6, 5, yes. Okay.
I'm like, literally just looking over there, I was like, hold on.
What are you going to tell me about the quality of this particular 7th chord? No, but you've gotten 80% there. But what is this? Major, dominant, minor,
oh,
half diminished, fully diminished?
give me a moment now. It's
Well,
B flat.
so
It's a diminished.
G, B flat, diminished triad.
triad with diminished 7. No, what is that?
E to G, E to D
Is a minus.
is a minor 7.
So half to this?
Half diminished, yes, good. Half diminished. So then we would label that 2 half diminished 6 5. And remember again, in minor, the 2 chord, a 2/7 is going to be half diminished, just diatonically. So you don't have to worry so much, like if you're in minor and you're looking for some sort of predominant harmony, and it's a seventh chord, it's going to be half diminished,
Okay.
unless it's altered. And 2 is going to go to 5. Yeah, right? That's something else about analysis, maybe I should just, so there's a certain, sorry?
I was like, is there a
Pattern, yeah, pattern is a good word, yeah. These things, so if you start on 1, and you go to 6, and you go to 2, the next likely thing is to be 5. So then instead of thinking, I'm looking at a measure and any harmony is possible, you should maybe look at it and think, well, it's probably 5. And if it's not 5, it might be 7, because the 7 is also like a leading tone harmony, right, that will take you to tonic. So you can start like making assumptions, almost like a detective case or something like that. Well, if it's this and then this and then this, that's got to be that, and if that's 5, what's likely to come next? Don't look. Well, you got 2 choices, right? It's going to be 1 or it's going to be 6. Those are your choices. And this, with the 2 B's down here, is 1, right? So the reason I bring that up is because if you're sitting there thinking every chord is possible, like, oh my gosh, this is every single possible chord, every single possible. You want to narrow your focus down, and then you can say, okay, well, if it's 5, it's going to be 1, likely. And so this is 1. And actually what happens again is that this kind of repeats. You get the same chord again. It's just voiced a little differently, but it's still B flat. This is B flat. I know those letter lines are tough, but then this is G and D, D and E, G and D, D and E. It's all 2.
Wait.
So B flat, octave B flat, G, D, and then E. So E, E, G, B flat, D. That's our 2. And this one is G, so the G which is set up here is held on to A and C. So what would this one be? Well, again, what's going to follow 2? 5. So your only question is it 5 the triad or 5 the 7th chord? Right, 7th, because the G down here. Again, I know the letter lines, like you're not used to that, but you have to kind of start getting used to it. But also just think, like if I already analyze this as G here, and it's held on to, in some ways this is like 4-part writing, right? This is bass, tenor, alto and soprano. Bass, tenor, alto and soprano. And they're sort of alternating those things, So when you get here, bass, tenor, so the tenor has the 7th, the altos have the root, and the sopranos have the leading tone. And then they're just kind of alternating.
I want to get to that fluency where I'm like looking at a chord and I go, this is the 5th, the 7th.
Yeah. Well, again, part of it is analyzing. Part of it is playing and analyzing. I know it sounds weird, but like you're playing a piano piece and going, oh, I'm playing 5. Oh, I'm playing 1. Oh, I'm playing 6. Oh, I'm playing... Like you start thinking that way, and it actually helps you to gain that fluency. Another good thing is to play in a lot of keys, and this is where pianists have the advantage. Like if I say I'm going to play 6, 2, 5, 1 in C major, now I'm going to take that in G major, now I'm going to take that in D major, now I'm going to take that, and just go around the circle of fifths. That's a great way to gain fluency, because you have to physically do that. What about guitar? I mean, you might think about it or ask your guitar teacher about that, but that might be a way to do that. I'm just familiar with it on piano, and Professor Kahn would tell you the same thing. If you can play 6, 2, 5, 1 in all the keys, you can accompany bunch of songs. I mean, we just did Blue Moon, but there's a ton of literature that's just that. And in some cases, you don't need maybe the 6, you just play 2, 5, 1, you know. But if you can put it in different keys, that really helps with the key fluency, is actually putting physicality to it. Because to do it intellectually is one thing, right? But to do it physically on your instrument is another thing. Yeah. So 5, 7, and then of course, 1. Do you want to look at Mozart? Yeah, let's just take a quick look at Mozart if you guys don't mind standing a little bit. Well, I know sometimes orchestral stuff seems intimidating. I'm sorry I didn't include the first two, the first page, which would have actually told you what instruments.
I don't even know how to look at this.
Well, let's see if I can break it down for you. Okay. So this is an orchestral score, all right? What we've got here is the string section, all right? And then, this is the piano. Sorry, this is a piano concerto by Mozart. I should have included the first page. Would have made it. So this is the piano part. These are the horns, and these are the woodwinds. So this is flutes, oboes, and bassoons. Clarinet was just becoming usable in the orchestra at this time, and Mozart didn't include it in this one, but he does have it in other of his piano concertos, a little historical. But clarinet was, like I said, it was just becoming an instrument, like a thing that became part of the orchestra and became the standard. Otherwise, you'd have like flute, oboe, clarinet, and bassoon in the woodwind section. But that's not here. And then these are horns, but the horns are sounding a perfect fourth lower. Do you guys know about French horn and transposition? So the standard horn, like Cadiz plays, is a horn in F, which means when they play the note C, like they're reading the note C, out sounds F. Yeah. So
the fourth up?
Well, this is different. This is a natural horn. Don't confuse. The standard horn these days, when they see the note C and finger that and play it, what actually comes out is an F. And that's what they call it, horn in F.
So like a fifth down then?
Yeah, fifth down. Now, the way the horns, this is like, gets a little involved, but the horns play the overtone series, right? So it's a length of tubing, and the original French horns did not have valves on them. They were just a long curved length of tubing, and in fact, what they would do sometimes, some horns, would be they'd change what they called crooks. So the horn would have loops, and they could pull out one loop and put in another and make it in a different key. But they were still only in one key, so they couldn't play chromatically necessarily while in the middle of a piece, right? That usually it'd just be like, you're a horn in E flat, and that's what the rest of the piece is going to be. So that's why in a lot of early stuff like this, really Mozart, what you'll hear horns doing is bum ba bum bum ba bum bum ba bum, you know, this kind of like tonic and dominant stuff, because that's the easiest stuff for them to play. Because really, again, because it's just a length of tubing, the only way they could make different pitches was to modify their embouchure to get different parts of the overtone series. So typically they're playing the tonic or the dominant or the upper tonic or maybe the third, but not much else. And then in order to change that, they would change the crooks. You know. Then later on, the modern valve horn is in F. And so there they have valves. They can get using the valves, they can get notes in every different key. Same thing with the trumpet, right? So the valves on the top allow them to get that. Early trumpets were just, you know, and that's it. These horns are not, the way this part is written is not for a modern horn in F. Okay? It's horn in G, Yeah, G, which is going to be C sounding G. Yeah, so this is the written music for the horn, but what it's really sounding is a G. So and there are other instruments that are transposing, like clarinet is transposing, saxophone is transposing, English horn is transposing, but there are other ones that are transposing instruments. So you have to, those you have to kind of know what the sounding pitch is. So that's why all of these have a key signature of G. This one has the key signature of C, because it's a transposing instrument. Okay, but, so, these are the strings, this is the piano, these are the horns, these are the woodwinds. Okay? And what I thought we would do is just look at the strings, because that's the easiest for us. And you'll see, though, that these other parts are just kind of mirroring. So the bassoons here, like they're playing in G, which is what the cello is playing, and then these other notes will fit in with the other harmonies. So it's like G, D, B, G, that's all part of the G chord. That's all, it's kind of the one chord. So it's not, I don't want to say it's not important, but they're playing the same things that the strings are playing. That was another thing that at this time, the string section tended to be the main ones, and the woodwinds were the color, right? And so the string section would be given most of the melodic material. The woodwinds could come in with some color, but not necessarily. So we'll look at the strings. Everybody okay with that? So if we look at the strings here in this measure, actually, well, yeah. So we've got one sharp, right? And we're pretty much talking G major here. Yeah. If we look at G, and this is a B and a G, this is a D and a B. So this is all pretty much G major. The only weird thing is the C sharp, which again is another like retardation. I forget where it comes from, but it's in the context of this G major triad. That C sharp that resolves, so in all this figuration, it's eventually resolving to a G major triad. So all this is G, and so if I was going to analyze this, I would say this is in the key of G, and this is one chord. Now, if we get a little bit, this is a little bit hard to analyze here in terms of this stuff, because it's really mostly about the different lines. So we have B, A, and G, and we have B, C, and D, and G, B, and D. So it's about the lines that are going through there rather than a harmony itself. And if you were to analyze it, the harmony would change probably more quickly than you might want. So what I would do is look towards this measure, and especially this sonority on the beginning, which is that forte piano, which is bum. So if we look at D and D and F sharp and C, what does that suggest in terms of a harmony? So if that very first measure is this kind of stuff, so it's very one, right? And then the second measure, again, we're going to say, well, that's mostly contrapuntal stuff. We get to the third measure, which is this. What does that sound like to you?
A 6.
What? 6?
I don't.
No, you're wrong. So here's, and then,
Oh. 5?
5.
Yeah. Oops.
So if you were in musicianship class and Professor Carlos said, what is that? You would say 1, 5, 1. Okay. Now again, there's other stuff going on here. after the C, you get the scale passage here, after the F sharp, you get the scale passage here, after the D, you get the scale passage here. But the important thing is that sonority that's happening right on the downbeat there. That D dominant 7 that's happening there. And so I would analyze that as 5/7. And that just continues on, although we have this other stuff in the woodwind. So we have the dominant chord sounding, like this, and then we have the woodwinds going. Right. And so that's our resolution. That's our one chord. So 5 and then 1. Is everybody okay with that? So G, B, and D is all kind of a one chord. And again, you could analyze this differently. You could say like this is something like 1, 2, 1. But I would just sort of stay away from that and say it's like 1. He does do some 2 stuff later on. And then what is this here?
5.
5 again, yeah. Or 5/7 actually, because remember the first violin there has a 7. Okay, now we get to the interesting part. So in this measure here, right, and this is all in one measure, the woodwinds, the horns, the piano, none of them are doing anything except the strings. What is going on here? And remember to look at the gestalt.
The 7 chord?
It is a 7 chord, yeah. If I'm in the key of G, and I've got F sharp,
F.
what is that now?
A.
A, good. Alto clef reading.
Yeah.
A,
C and
C, and E.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. Oh, it's root position. Like, that wasn't hard at all.
It's going to be a 7.
Yeah,
So it's
7.
Yeah, it's 7. And in a major key, what is the 7 chord? What is it? What quality? Half diminished, yeah. So 7 half diminished 7. Seven half diminished 7. What about this measure here? 1, yeah.
Yeah.
G, B, B, D, all one chord. So 1, which makes sense, right? We expect the 7 half diminished to resolve to 1. And again, leading tone, F sharp, resolving on the tonic. Fa, the C, resolving down to the 3rd, and also the 7th of the chord, which is E, resolving down to the 5th, like that. So it's very standard voice leading. What's kind of unusual is to go from a dominant 7 to a half diminished 7, because this is considered a less stable chord than this one, right? Because it's half diminished. So this chord is not as stable as the dominant 7. So it's unusual to go from a more stable chord to a less stable chord. Normally it's the other way around. So you could go from this one to this one, but not this one to this one. But what I think Mozart wanted was a kind of shock value, right? When you hear the dominant harmony, you expect the next thing to be
1. Yeah.
right. And so instead he does this, and then he does this. And then it goes off again. And then he actually repeats, if you look at the next page, oh no, sorry. Maybe? did that twice. Sorry, I thought he did the 5 to 7 diminished twice. Maybe it comes in later on. But that's all that's unusual about it. Again, normally you wouldn't go from 5/7 to 7 half diminished 7. It would be the other way around. You'd go from something like 7 half diminished 7 to 5/7 and then to 1. In other words, from the less stable to the more stable, rather than the more stable to the less stable. But again, it's Mozart, and it makes for a nice dramatic effect, right? Any questions about that?
What is that next measure?
I'm going to say, what is that next measure? Well, C, E, good. Did you ever play viola? Or you just got your alphabet down?
It's like C, C, B.
Now, I think these are non-chord tones. You know, they're just suspensions. So we really have C, E, A, C, which makes sense as in the key of G. A 2-chord, yeah. A 2-chord in first inversion. And then, well, okay. Wow, this is very interesting. So it resolves to a 2-chord, and then we get these notes, G and B, which are definitely not part of the 2-chord, right?
One.
But we could have, well, so when we get to D here, we have D, D, G is still here, and B is still here. So what would you think?
A 1.
A 1, but what inversion?
Second inversion.
Yeah, 1/6/4, right? And then, on the very last chord of B here, A, F sharp, C, and the D. D, C, F sharp, A. D, F sharp, A, C. If I write it out, you're gonna D, F sharp, A, C.
Is a major minor, so dominant.
Balance it.
Never.
But it's good you're thinking it through, Steph. But yeah, that would be 5/7. The interesting thing is he telegraphs the 1/6/4 by bringing in these two notes here. So when we've still got the bass is still sounding on the remnants of that that 2-chord. So what we've got C. I can't reach the E. Let me do it this way. So those are the non-chord tones. So passing tones, and then so it's kind of interesting the overlapping of harmonies. In other words, this G and B are part of the 1/6/4. They come in early as an anticipation of the 1/6/4 that occurs on beat 3, and then 5 here. So it's just interesting the way he has the harmonies kind of overlapping, anticipating. And then the next page we resolve to 1. Okay, any questions about that?
No.
All right, well, let's call it quits for there. Okay. That's probably enough for today. I think I'll start to get brain fried.